Let's talk about fields within cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a very, very broad area. It's important to know a little bit about everything, but it's also important to specialize so that you can stand out and have an in-demand skill to differentiate yourself. I did this early on in my career. Back when Windows guys were a dime a dozen, I learned Linux and really specialized in Linux. That really helped me to stand out and get jobs. And then that turned into specializing in Linux security and then cloud security and containers and vulnerability management and so on. Imagine every technology which exists, every operating system, every programming language, every network protocol, every kind of server, web servers, mail servers, file servers, all these different things. You got virtualization technology. You've got, there's this whole massive stack of technology which powers everything we do. There has to be someone out there who specializes in every single piece of it. And it's fine to be a generalist to a certain point, but you also need to be able to specialize and really find your niche within cybersecurity. Let's take a quick look at this neat little cybersecurity career certification thing that I've found. If we look at cyberseek.org/certifications.html, I just found this while randomly browsing and looking for a sort of a list of cybersecurity careers. And this was interesting. It was kind of fun to play with. It is far from complete. These are very general, high-level titles. For example, we have right here cybersecurity engineer, which is what I did for quite a while, and it suggests some certifications. Like the number one certification you're going to want to have for that is CISSP. We'll talk more about certifications later, but that is certainly a biggie. It's kind of like the PhD of cybersecurity without actually being a PhD from an accredited university or anything. But I consider it like the top security certification to shoot for eventually when you get to that point. Cybersecurity engineer, and it shows you some skills it connects to here on the right. There's cybersecurity analyst, cybersecurity manager, cybersecurity consultant, penetration and vulnerability tester. So these things, you can kind of consider these like blue team or white hat or whatever you want to call them. But then you've got penetration and vulnerability tester. That's a little more red team. Incident and intrusion analyst. That's someone whose job it is to respond to attacks. And companies will usually have a procedure they run through to properly deal with the situation. Cybersecurity specialist. I'm a little less clear on exactly what that is. A lot of these titles are flexible, kind of up in the air. There is no real industry standard for any of these things, but these are some of the things you may encounter. IT auditor, that's another specialty. IT auditor, kind of like tax auditor in that you're making sure that everyone is following the rules, doing what they're supposed to be doing, that everything is being logged, that people are doing all the right thing, following the company policies, and you're kind of looking for trouble, looking for signs of people not following the policies, or looking for signs of not so much intrusion, because that's sort of somebody else's job here, but cybersecurity architect, that's technically what my title is nowadays most of the time. Cybersecurity architects kind of look at the big picture and design solutions, and then cybersecurity engineers up here often implement those solutions, set up the tools, configure the tools, administer the tools, things like that. The cybersecurity architect might say, we're going to have this kind of firewall, and we're going to follow this sort of policy, and we're going to have ingress filtering and egress filtering, and we're going to have the CEO or somebody in position of authority sign off on the firewall rules every quarter or once a year or whatever the policy is, things like that. And the cybersecurity engineer will go out and actually set that up and write the rules and things per the specifications of the cybersecurity architect. And then your IT auditor might come along and make sure that the rules and things that are actually in place are the ones specified by the policy laid out by the architect. Something like that. Cybercrime analyst. That's an interesting one. That is a case where it's sort of like digital forensics. Somebody will look at a server that's been broken into and look at all the traces left behind. Or they might analyze a mobile phone that was used in a crime. There are many interesting things to be done there. Let's see, that's it for this page. Oh, it lays them out kind of entry level, mid-level, advanced. Let's see. Cybersecurity specialist. Let's see, entry level. I said earlier that cybersecurity is not really an entry level career, but incident and intrusion analyst might be something you get into as one of your first cybersecurity roles. Security Operations Center is another one. They don't have that on this page, but again, there are just many, many different possible roles and niches one could take. Let's see. Just among, and also specializations, right? I mentioned specializations a moment ago. Let's take, for example, cybersecurity engineer. You might be a cybersecurity engineer specializing in Linux. That's what I did for quite a while. Or you might be a cybersecurity engineer specializing in Windows or Mac or cloud or networks, endpoint protection, antivirus, things like that. Especially on Windows and Mac, there are people who specialize in endpoint detection and response. That is a totally valid and in-demand field one could go into as a specialization. They don't have on here compliance. I have worked with a number of compliance people as well. You may have, for example, heard of HIPAA, right? It is someone's job to protect your personal health information. A lot of times there will be a compliance person whose job it is to understand the requirements of the regulations and to work with the auditors and to work with the security architect and security engineers to put together and run a program, a security program, which is compliant with, for example, HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. But there's a number of other compliance regimes. I've worked on HIPAA. I've worked on NIST. I've worked on PCI, FedRAMP, SOC, SOX, GDPR, and various others. And so the compliance person can be a very key person in enabling the business to operate, because a lot of people or a lot of businesses are required to be compliant, and they can get into big trouble if they are not compliant. And the compliance person puts all that together. There's also Security Operations Center, which again is not on our little web page here, but the Security Operations Center, or SOC, are often in charge of security monitoring. They're watching the logs and various alerts coming from the firewall, the network intrusion detection system, the host intrusion detection systems, all the audit logs coming in. They're looking for indicators of compromise. They're or even indicators of attack, depending. And that is basically looking at the logs, looking at everything going on the network, and monitoring for security incidents. And they're also monitoring for availability. They're monitoring to make sure that all of the security tools are up and running. Clearly, if your intrusion detection system is crashed and not working, you're probably not going to get any alerts from it. So they are often tasked with some degree of security operations. Well, security operations center. But I mean, making sure that all that stuff is operational. Let's see, what else do we have here? Penetration tester. And again, these penetration tester guys are pretty amazing, but it's a very technical, hardcore field to be in. There are people who specialize in the security of, as I mentioned earlier, every technology out there. And the penetration testing people, even more so. There are people who specialize in databases. There are people who specialize in all the different major operating systems. There are people who specialize in just certain network equipment. You'll have your Juniper guy. You'll have your Cisco guy. Their job is to focus on those particular things. Now, most of the jobs that we've spoken about so far are jobs that would be hired on to a company in a salaried position and kind of a normal 9-to-5 type job. Some of these jobs are not that. Things like the SOC, for example, those tend to be shift work. Oftentimes SOCs are manned 24/7. And penetration tester is another exception. Not so much in the hours. They can often work 9-to-5 type hours, but one company generally won't full-time employ a team of penetration testers, particularly not very specialized penetration testers. But there are companies out there who contract to other companies their penetration testing services. So let's say you are a pen tester who specializes in a particular semi-obscure technology. Your company will market your skills to the enterprises out there who are using that technology, and you may have an engagement where you're going to spend 2 weeks hammering on their implementation of that technology. And then you find whatever you find whatever vulnerabilities you find, you write them up, and then you move on to the next contract. But there's not generally a company who would hire you as a full-time employee to do this just on their own infrastructure. Usually pen testers work for pen testing companies, and they specialize in that sort of thing. The whole company does. And so you'll move from project to project. And we may as well mention now, and we'll talk more about it later, but communication skills are important in all these roles, but I particularly think of it in terms of penetration testing because at the end of the engagement, you need to write up a report and explain to them what you found, how you found it, exactly what you did step by step typically to exploit it so they can fully understand how this works and know how to fix it. But in all of these positions, communication skills are important. If you are a security engineer, you need to be able to communicate your ideas about security with your coworkers. A security architect needs to be able to document how the system they're designing is supposed to work. A traditional architect draws up blueprints or mechanical designs or something like that. A security architect draws up a security plan and has to be able to communicate it to the rest of the company. The auditors need to be able to communicate their findings. The compliance people need to be able to communicate with the whole team, often with executives, and with auditors from, third parties who will come in and make sure that you are compliant. So there's a lot of communication that happens here. Incident response, that's another one. I think I mentioned that earlier. Application security. That is an interesting one. In application security, you often specialize in a programming language or multiple programming languages, certain technology stacks, certain libraries. so that you can either help the programmers design and implement a secure application, application meaning, you know, any piece of computer software really. Often it's things like servers, web applications, anything dealing in security, any software dealing in sensitive data is going to have some aspect of application security. You may be an expert in the C programming language, and you know how to go through applications written in C, finding bad and unsafe programming practice. If you're using an email client written in C, and somebody sends you a malicious email, an email formed in just a certain special way to tickle a bug in your email client, which causes it to execute some command, which they have provided, that's bad. And that's the kind of thing application security people do. They design applications, they help programmers to design and implement applications, they audit applications, even pen testing applications. To a certain degree, you need to be very familiar with application security. There's also things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and this is web application focused, these particular examples, but even inside of the niche of application security, there are numerous specializations in terms of, is this web, is this desktop, is this Java, is this C, is it something else? Application security is a big thing. Another area that you could specialize in would be intrusion detection or threat hunting. I particularly enjoy this one. There's a couple different ways to go about this. You may do network intrusion detection, and you will learn the intimate details of how TCP/IP and how the data flows over the network and how it can be obscured and how network encryption works and so on, so that you can watch the traffic passing over the network and look for signs of intrusion. Or you could specialize in a sort of a event-based intrusion detection, log analysis. I've actually done a lot of this. There are various tools out there like Splunk and Elasticsearch and Logstash and syslog and rsyslog and AuditD and all kinds of things that generate events. So-and-so logged into a server, somebody else sent an email, this IP address downloaded this web page from your website. All these are events which get recorded, and you can analyze all these events looking for signs of intrusion. So that's very interesting. There's also something called social engineering. Social engineering is very interesting, and it is actually one of the relatively few non-technical cybersecurity specializations. It's not necessarily even cybersecurity, although it has a lot of cybersecurity applications. Social engineering is a situation where somebody calls you up on the phone, says, "Hello, this is Bob from Microsoft Tech Support, and we've detected a problem and we need your password to fix it." Or, "This is Jill from IT and I need your email password to troubleshoot an issue," something like that. They manipulate people, often psychologically, emotionally, and they get things that way. They get secrets, they get access to things. It is very clever. At the DEF CON conference, one of my favorite computer security conferences, they have something called the Social Engineering Village, and they run a contest where people actually get on the phone and they call people and try to trick them out of information. Now, I've not read the rules on this. It's not entirely clear to me how they have this set up, but I do know that it's all legal, it's all legit, but they have a very interesting contest there in manipulating people. So if you're a smooth talker, if you're a very persuasive person, if you've got a very trustworthy face, if you are someone that people would stereotypically perceive to be harmless and innocent, you might have a career in social engineering. There are companies, and this is a job similar to the penetration testing job, where there are companies who will hire you, put you on salary, and then hire you out to other companies to try to social engineer their employees to see where the vulnerabilities are, what the people's weaknesses are. And that can be very interesting. I actually don't know many people in social engineering. It is one of the rarest fields in cybersecurity, in my experience. But it is a thing.